Um, so for those of you who may not have been part of this David story that we've been focusing on these last couple of weeks, I'm going to get you up to speed. So David is one of the most beloved figures of all of Israel. He's a warrior, prophet, king. He led his people to glory in battle and expanded and strengthened Israel's influence throughout all the land. All right? He was the one that famously killed Goliath, the Philistine, and he did it without any armor, with just the sling and the rock that he had. He was this tiny, shrimpy kid, and there was this great, our God is bigger than yours thing that Israel got to do with that. But David was also this, lover and this poet, and so he was, dancing wildly in the streets because he was so happy about God, and he proclaimed his love for his buddy, Jonathan. And he also played the harp and wrote a lot of songs, and he was just kind of this interesting mix of military conqueror and poetic aesthete, just very kind of a complex figure. So he was really popular, and everybody just really loved him. And one day, that would all shift. He sent all of his troops off to battle, and while they were away, he went up on the roof of his palace, and then he saw somebody up there that piqued his attention. He saw this woman bathing, and she was beautiful, and he wanted to know who she was, and they told him it was Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, who was one of his most loyal soldiers, was in the top brigade of personal bodyguards of the army of God. I mean, he was one of the most loyal. So David said, "Send her to me." And the scripture says that he lay with her, and she became pregnant. And then he tried a lot of different things to cover it up. And then those things failed, and so he had Uriah killed by sending him into the front lines of battle without adequate support. So that was a real turning point in this sort of happy, great, popular narrative of David, the warrior king. This thing that David had done, in the words of the text, displeased the Lord. So God sends Nathan to go and challenge him about it. Nathan goes up to David and is like, "I have this purely hypothetical story for you. Let's say there's this rich, powerful man that totally abuses and takes advantage of this other man. Is that right?" And David's like, "Of course that's not right. That guy should die." And then Nathan is like, "What? You are the man. You are the man. Not that man. You are that man." And then this scripture happens immediately after Nathan confronts David with that truth. It's what David says. David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan said to David, "Now the Lord has put away your sin, you shall not die." After his adultery with another woman, after his murder of another man, David is somehow in this moment able to face and hear and acknowledge the truth. He was able to be fully vulnerable before Nathan, before his kingdom, before God, and even before his own self. And that vulnerability is what made possible this moment of transformation back toward redemption for David. Totally vulnerable to all of those things outside of his power in that moment. So today, I am lucky. We all are lucky. But I am also lucky to have been able to invite some of you to give testimony today about vulnerability, stories of vulnerability. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite Colleen to start us off. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Colleen. I've met a lot of you, but there are a few I don't know, so hi, I'm Colleen. And those of you who weren't at the first service today, Tom did a little kind of demonstration of vulnerability with during the children's moment. He went up to the altar table and crouched down behind it and under it and did the whole thing there talking about vulnerability. And it brought back memories of when I was in first grade and I used to hide under my desk because my teacher wanted me to join this group that was going to write stories and read them out loud to the other kids, and I wasn't able to do that. So I've come a long way because I also used to stutter during that time. So this is like huge for me. So when I agreed to speak today, I was hoping for a great theme like curiosity or courage. I was stoked for those topics, but then I heard and even checked again to be sure, yes, today's theme is vulnerability. And that made me want to hide under something because I couldn't think, let me find my spot. I couldn't think of anything more vulnerable in that moment than having to discuss my vulnerability. But then I got serious, and I delved into my feelings, and I realized how right it is that I'm talking about this today of all days. Because nothing has ever made me feel more vulnerable than being a mom. Because nothing opened me up to love more than being a mom. I was so looking forward to mothering my babies. I was ready, willing, and able. At least I thought I was. Nobody ever told me how it was really going to be. And maybe nobody can do that. When Victoria was born 6 weeks premature, weighing only 4 pounds, 7 ounces, and I was discharged from the hospital while she was left behind, I broke down in tears because it's got to be one of the most unnatural acts I've ever had to do. I wept uncontrollably. Of course, it was nothing compared to the tears that flowed when we were informed we might want to consider autism. Sitting almost 3 years later in the pediatrician's office to discuss her symptoms, which we couldn't quite make sense of. That was certainly another of the most fearful and painful moments of my life, though I had my suspicions about her developmental delay. And I knew I had reached my least tolerable level of vulnerability when Adam was born just 3 weeks later. And I could no longer do anything without feeling completely inadequate to the task. I couldn't get up off the couch unless it was to take care of my children. I couldn't even walk to the freezer and take something out to thaw for dinner. And I've come to the part that really sets me up for a vulnerability hangover, as Brené Brown describes in her book, Daring Greatly. Even when I trust people, even when I want and choose to share, I still have a vulnerability hangover. I had let that depression and the nighttime anxiety attacks go on much longer than I would have let it go for anyone I love. Taking care of me isn't always top in my mind, not even on my radar, especially when I have my children's wants and needs to consider, and my head's in a tailspin over unexpected things beyond my, and really anyone's, control. Over time, I spiraled to the lowest point of my depression and anxiety, enough to consider suicide. I even had it all planned out, but I didn't do it. Only because if I did, I thought people would think I was an unfit mother for abandoning my children. And despite everything else, I knew I wasn't a bad mother. That's the only reason I could think of to not do it. I finally sought counseling, not even for the first or last time in life. But like many others in my family, I still live with depression and its side effects. Sharing this with all of you may inevitably lead to feelings of regret for opening up that part of my history. I may feel tons of exposure about it sooner or later. But I trust in you to hold my story in faith and to hold me in your hearts and minds as a person worthy of expressing all that's in my heart. I know that you may have experienced some of the same feelings and thoughts. I know I'm in good company because some of you have been courageous enough to tell your stories. Because when I'm here with you, I know I'm with other vulnerable people, and we belong here just as we are.
I'm grading myself. Okay. Cindy sang. Cindy and I began our connection the day she came home from the hospital. She became my little sister. Yet more than that, we were each other's safe havens. My biggest fear was death or disappearance of someone I loved. My mom died. Her biggest fear was violence at the hands of a loved one. It had happened too often. Both of us were extremely sensitive and gentle, although our worldly armor was street smarts. We hid our vulnerability behind a shield of extreme risk-taking. 14 years, 10 days ago, my phone rang. Cindy was now a mother of 3, a spiritual leader, a holistic practitioner, a massage therapist, a lobbyist, and the list goes on. It was late, and our conversation was honest and lengthy. They always were. She began talking about her husband, family, work, and plans. There was something different in the sound of her voice. We were always brutally honest with each other. I asked, "Cindy, are you dying?" And she said, "Yes! Thank you, thank you, thank you. Everyone is here trying to heal me. They're praying over me. They're using healing touch, holding ceremonies for me, bringing me healing elements. I'm exhausted from faking it. There is no one I can talk to, and I can't be honest with anyone." In our true form, humor rose to the occasion. "Cindy, which Hardy boy do you want me to be? Tom or Frank?" "Frank, be frank with me." This began our final adventure together. What do you want? What do you need? How and when? Being Cindy, she had written and organized everything to the moment of her death, then plans for the years to come. "Do you need me to come today?" No. I'll call you when I can't manage anymore." A few weeks later, the phone call came. This is when we spent our last 6 weeks together. Oops. Our greatest fears were here. Let the vulnerabilities begin. The moment I walked into her space, her 6-foot frame, usually muscled and glowing with color, was a grayish white. As soon as she saw me, she knew there was no turning back. Our souls were exposed to one another, which allowed us to give everything we had honestly, even in our always present joy and jokes. Here I was, with the role of my life reversed. I was now the adult, giving a 4, 7, and 15-year-old all the loving care within me. Cindy was now surrendering her identity, warrior, teacher, mother, saying goodbye to a life on this earth. We played pranks, we laughed, we cried, we struggled. Yet even when her reality and her subconscious became confused, we remained present until something solid replaced the fog. Both of us were saying goodbye to huge pieces of ourselves. None of it made sense, and there were absolutely no answers. Her life was complex. When healthy, it was complex, and now it was pure chaos. I went into survival mode. People honestly lined up to get advice, to see her. She no longer could share her energy with anyone except her sons and daughter. I was the bouncer. There were 3 possible entries into Cindy's space. It took the aggressive Toby to block the way and honestly toss people physically out that were sneaking in. For Cindy, there was no longer a choice. She had to lay down her shield, pass it to me to protect her. There were trips for treatments we all knew wouldn't work. They weren't going to save her. Her list of everything that she had to do one last time. You know and can imagine how overwhelming it was. Hospice was help for Cameron, Matthew, and Dakota. Complex? Did I mention she put together a ceremony, complete with musicians, a banquet, spiritual practices, props, and of course, costumes with great love. Here it is. Our greatest gift to each other came from dropping all defenses. We laughed our dupas off when, just like 6-year-olds, we were both in the bathtub together, making bubble beards and joking and laughing, just 2 little girls. We watched our last movie together. We drove relatives crazy at 3 p.m. each day when we put on the New Age music and meditated, napped until 4. Although not everyone understood her ice cream fight, that flying scoop battle, let that 6-year-old have gleeful last standoff. She left the world as she came in, being loved, fed, bathed. In her last moments at 4 a.m., August 29th, 2002, she sang to herself as she took her last breath. Cindy sang, with this, a transformation did happen. Instead of being reckless, not really caring if I lived, not really caring if I lived or died, I had to worry about me. I no longer had to worry that others worried about me. No, the most loving gift I could give those was to outlive all of you. So I could care for them at a good, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Whew. So I could care for, and I'm good at that, and I can care for all of you. But most of all for me, to say goodbye and spare them the anguish of letting go. This is about mothers. My mom's illness had me setting up treatments at the age of 7. Her sense of humor and loving nature taught me it was the soul that made the woman. When she could no longer walk, I witnessed her zest for life. She was a bed-bound activist. From my mom to Cindy, I knew how to give without stealing their dignity. Now both my mom and Cindy say, enough. It's time to go out and play. Much love to all the mamas, both living and dead. We honor you.
Well, we're waiting for Andy to tune, and I wasn't planning on doing this. In fact, I specifically decided against it. But in solidarity with those of you who have shown vulnerability thus far, I'm going to do it. I'm ready. Can do it. I have a song here that is called To Lisa. from Tom. And do you see the handwriting? Can you kind of see from there? This is what my handwriting looked like in 7th grade. And I wrote tortured romantic poetry and also really bad, like, James Taylor knockoff songs. And when the two come together, it's just such a delectable gift to the musical world. And so I sang a part of this one song, which was one of the first ones from 7th grade, an ode to Lisa Marie for the 10 a.m. worship service. And frankly, I'm not as scared of you all, but I'll play a little bit of it. Ready? Lisa, Lisa, fair and sweet, let's talk a little while. You make my heart quickly beat, and God, I love your smile. When I first set eyes on you, I thought of what could happen. I don't really know. I have no idea what that is referring to. I thought of what could happen. If you don't like me, I'll get a clue, and I will stop the yapping. With the apostrophe. I wrote yapping. Right? Mainly, but I'm kind of worried that this might not work out. That is why I hurried to write this about Lisa, oh Lisa. Please just say you like me too. Lisa, oh Lisa. Please just say you like me too. Okay.